Welcome to your source for research, innovation, news, insights, and commentary. This is a special Friday edition of Research Business Daily Report, where we're sponsored this week by KL Communications, whose expertise in customer co-creation has led them to a proprietary crowd-weaving platform that is powering the next generation of online insight communities. Well, we are very pleased today to have three experts in advertising research to join us, and we'll be discussing what's ahead this coming Sunday at the Super Bowl, or as Stephen Colbert has been calling it the last couple of days, the Suburb Owl, in order to not get in trouble with the NFL. Let me introduce our participants today. David Paull is the founder and CEO of Dialsmith. Dave, why don't you wave so we all know who you are? Next, George Musi, the head of cross-media analytics for DG. Thank you, George, for joining us. And Paull Shellenberg, who was with us a couple of weeks ago. He's the advertising research specialist with Socratic Technologies.
Good morning.
So, gentlemen, let's get right to it. The Super Bowl is a couple of days away. You've all had an opportunity to take a look at least some of the advertising, which has been pre-released. David, let's start with you. Do you believe that the advertisers for the Super Bowl this year are all looking at the effectiveness of their advertising in the same way?
Well, first, Bob, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. It's a good question. I think effectiveness is really different to a number of these advertisers. With a traditional ad buy, effectiveness might be measuring activation and whether or not you move someone to actually interact with a brand. And I think for Super Bowl advertising, the goal is more about buzz, and then you need a campaign that has a strong back end to move consumers to activation over time. So I think generating buzz is frankly more important here, and if that's what we're looking to measure, then I think most of these advertisers do take that very seriously, as we see from some of the really creative and even outrageous campaigns that air during the game.
George, do you agree with what David just said about basically everybody just looking for buzz?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I agree with it to a certain extent. I think depending on where you sit in the maturity scale, certain advertisers which are more mature, like P&G or Coke or Pepsi, are going to look at different things. Volumetric businesses will look at different things. New brands that are this is their first year, second year, new to the big stage, they're going to look at creating the most and longest tail buzz. Now, when they look at what they're trying to do, I think from an effectiveness and measurement standpoint, they're looking at different things, either be it upper funnel, middle funnel, lower funnel. But when you want to look at the entire ROI effectiveness, you got to think about the entire picture. So it's media metrics, it's action metrics, it's brand metrics, it's the entire picture. Now, most companies are gonna care about ROI, and that most of the time that ROI is going to come from sales, right? You don't spend $4 million on average on a 30-second spot for brand awareness. Now, I agree with David; it's a long tail effect, but I think you have to see some type of instantaneous value created up front with the expectation that incremental value will keep growing as that spot and as that advertisement, which is now 2 to 3 months long, right, given the pre-releases, the build-up, and the post, that you're going to get some type of value that's created. But I would expect initial pop.
Okay. And Paull, what's your attitude about buzz versus anything else that these advertisers are looking at? And as somebody who's been doing this for decades, do you see anything different right now than you might have seen 3 or 5 or even 10 years ago?
Well, again, I echo David and George. Thanks for having me this morning. Really interesting comments by both David and George. I agree with almost everything they said. George mentioned new advertisers to the game. And we have found in the 21 years that we've been studying Super Bowl commercials that sometimes new advertisers, at least in our post-recognition scores, do the best. Why that is, maybe people are looking for something different. I don't really know the answer to that, but people like Anheuser-Busch and the car manufacturers who year in and year out advertise on the Super Bowl do really well in our recognition scores at the in a post-test basis. So rambling a little bit, but I think I haven't really seen much new this year, and this kind of goes back to almost every year the past 10, 15 years. The buzz that people are talking about is important, and I'm sure they want that, and they make sure they have it through the different media outlets that we're able to follow.
Okay. I'd like to give our viewers an understanding of how each of you are going to apply your expertise after the Super Bowl commercials are over. Sunday night, I guess some of you may be starting, or on Monday morning. Give me 30 seconds, each of you, about exactly what it is that you do. Paul, we're going to start with you.
Great. Yeah. This year is a little unique for me. The past few years, I've been working for a company called Brizzoni Research, and this year I'm with a company, Socratic Technologies. And there are two phases to our research. In previous years, there's always been just the post-testing that I've done. This year, we're going to do two phases. Again, phase one of our research will be conducted the day after the game using the Socratic perceptometer, a second-by-second reaction to the creative and content of each commercial. It measures overall likability as well as identifies any negative moment reactions. It includes continuous approval or interest ratings, comparability to established norms for ratings, and our Socratic cumulative score ratings, which consist of overall opinion, believability, brand fit, relevance, clarity, and likelihood of action. Now in phase two, which is what I've been conducting for the past 21 years, we'll conduct this the Thursday after the game. Using recognition measures, the Brizzoni model will show how well a commercial performs in over 51 diagnostic scores. Scores, by the way, that, again, we've accumulated from 21 years of testing Super Bowl commercials.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. George, you're up. What are you going to be doing?
So DG as a company, we're going to distribute, I think, probably well over 90% of all the advertising for the Super Bowl, both from a traditional TV as well as the online. So for us, it's going to be to get as much of a comprehensive picture of effectiveness as possible for our end client. So that's going to require both traditional metrics like Nielsen, TV ratings, coupled with Twitter, using their OCR and XCR products. For people that don't understand what they are, there's cross-platform campaign ratings and online campaign ratings. Combining that with set-top box data, overlaying some social media metrics, overlaying brand metrics, action metrics, trying to introduce the advertisers that are working with us, taking their proprietary first-party data, or KPOS, or any CRM data. So for us, it's trying to get a comprehensive understanding of what that 4 million or 20 million or 40 million has purchased for that client, right? So some clients are going to care about, well, how many people did I reach? What perceptions did I change? And ultimately, what action did they take? Now, that can be answered fairly quickly based from databases, attitudes, just general compilation of data from available sources. But some of the more interesting ROI is going to have a necessary long tail effect. So you can't look at sales from an automotive perspective because it's going to take a month or two or three. Volumetric businesses like Coke and Pepsi, you can pretty much get a good understanding of the spike or the pop, given that we can get access to some of their information quite quickly. From an online perspective, it's going to get interesting. I mean, what are people saying? What are they not saying? What's their perception? How much of that is being shared? What do they like? So when I look at true ROI or true impact, you got to look at it from the perspective of holistically, and then what a TV deliver, what an online deliver, what specific channels within online delivered what. So at the end of the day, it's really a comprehensive understanding of melding of data sources coming together to really get an understanding of the holistic impact and effectiveness and ultimately ROI of this campaign. Because it is a campaign. It's not a one-day event anymore. It's a campaign.
Okay, great stuff. David, Dialsmith, obviously you're dealing with a dialer and getting reactions that way.
Yeah, we are actually. So we're the developer of the perception analyzer dial system that's used traditionally offline for advertising research, TV pilot testing, political speeches. And in recent years, we've moved that online using an online slider. And what we're doing this year with our new slider metrics tool is we're working with 8 television news affiliates around the country to offer visitors to their websites the opportunity to rate the Super Bowl ads second by second as they're watching them with the slider. So this week we've been able to start putting up ads that have been pre-released, and then all the way up through the game we'll be launching ads live as they air. So what we're really going for is that instant guttural reaction to every moment of the ad, and not only how the ads rank against one another with a vote or a thumbs up, thumbs down, but really looking at each individual moment so we can also focus on what are those moments that resonate, what peaks high and what bottoms out low. And what's interesting in what we've been finding last year and so far this year is that the top and bottom rated ads don't necessarily have the top and bottom rated moments. So we're finding the moments that resonate with people compared to how an ad performs holistically. And hopefully that's an interesting slice.
Okay. Before we get into what you've seen so far, I do have a question about, I guess, what's considered the gold standard, I guess, in the broad community, which is the ad meter that USA Today uses. Is it important for any of you to kind of surmount the image, the reputation that has, or is that more just a general, thing that's going to show up on TV on Monday and not really be all that relevant to the advertising community and effectiveness? George, why don't you start with that?
I think like anything else. I mean, you have traditional things that have been used. I'll equate that to the Nielsen TV measurement that's been going on forever. Right? There's value in any measurement, but when you look at it in a silo perspective, then what you're doing is discrediting everything else that needs to be included. Right? Mm-hmm. So although we look at it, it does have correlations to any other things, right? Mm-hmm. So what you don't want to see is things being completely different from one another, right?
Okay.
So we'll look at it, we'll understand it, but it's a piece of the puzzle. Right?
Okay.
It's not just one thing.
Great. Paul?
Oh, I couldn't agree more with George. There have been years past where our recognition scores and our total reached and effective scores correlate very highly with them. But there have been other years where they have not. And to me, that's, as George mentioned, it's nice to have that effect where they look similar. But when they're not similar, you sure better know why that's happening. And again, if these, they're spending so much money for this advertising, they really should know whether it's being effective or not. And you can really only find that out through a quantitative, I believe, post-test using our recognition-based methodology. It's the only way for an advertiser to really know if they reached and affected the audience that they were targeting.
Okay. David, does the ad meter matter to you?
Yeah, I really agree with George and Paul. I think it matters in the sense that it's become, I think, more of a pop culture thing than any kind of a scientific research thing. And we study that and we look at that as well as a particular metric and something that's important to take that real-time pulse. But to what the other guy said, you really do then have to drive deeper if you're going to look to actually make actionable business decisions. You wouldn't take that, that one rating, or even ours for that matter. It's all a piece of the puzzle. But I really think it's become more of a pop culture piece of the whole Super Bowl ad rating game than any one superior metric.
Okay. Guys, how many of the commercials have been released so far?
I've been able to...
Go ahead.
I've been able to identify about 15. There are a lot of teasers out there, but they're not a completed commercial.
Right. George and Paul, you agree with that number roundabouts?
Yeah, I think I've seen quite a bit. of commercials being released.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I do know is I don't think we'll know what the final commercial is until they air it. I mean, these are all tests. I mean, the whole idea of social media and YouTube and pre-release strategies is to get a really barometer testing of what is ultimately going to be perceived to work when you're actually spending $4 million. Right?
Okay.
So that's why I think it's happening. We're seeing a lot of things, but it's ultimately becoming a test scenario.
Okay, David, about 15 or more or less?
Yeah, about the same. We've tracked somewhere between 10 and 15, and like George said, there are a lot of 60s and 90s that are out there, which we know will likely not air. So, we're going to be keeping an eye on which versions actually do air. And I imagine there's editing and cutting going to be going on, this week based on buzz and feedback from the versions that have been pre-released.
Good. Okay, so 30 seconds from each of you. Let's try to keep it to that. From what you've seen so far, David, which commercials seemed to be most effective? Go.
From what I've seen so far, we're seeing those with an emotional connection are rating highest with our audience.
And those would be who?
Yeah. So, for instance, one of Hyundai's ads, which is called Dad's Sixth Sense, is currently our highest rated, and it's I think it's really for two reasons. One reason is it bucks the stereotype of doofus dads. It focuses on dads who are looking out and taking care of their kids.
Okay.
But the peak moment is really at the very end when the car really shows off and the auto braking system kicks in and saves the day. The Toyota Highlander ad with the Muppets is also scoring quite well, and I might tie that one to nostalgia, and people like the Muppets, and it's cute and it's funny.
Good. Paul?
Well, I've seen both of those that David mentioned, and the dad one did resonate well with me. However, in auto manufacturing commercials, the test is, yes, to show a nice commercial, but are people going to be able to remember those commercials and tell you who the advertiser is for? If not, then they didn't do their job. And I'm afraid that sometimes that's the case with these automobile ads. However, having said that, I saw the Kia K900, I think it's K900, I made a note here, luxury spot with Lawrence Fishburne. And it was a very impactful commercial, I thought. Now, whether people can tell us that's for Kia or not, that'll have to wait to be seen, but very impactful. I think everybody should pay attention to that ad.
Okay.
The one that my wife came in this morning and told me that if I didn't mention it, she wouldn't let me do one of these again, was the one for Anheuser-Busch called Puppy Love. She said if that doesn't win the #1 rated commercial, no matter what metric you used, then she doesn't believe in advertising. So when you see that, I think you'll appreciate what her comments are.
Okay. George, Kia and Toyota and Budweiser, and is there anybody else that jumps out?
Yeah, I think I look at it from the standpoint of put the brand aside for a second. I think what generally is either entertaining, educational, or emotional, right? So I'll bucket those in those kind of three themes, and then the idea is if it resonated, if it made an impact, can people actually remember the brand? And then after the fact, can they make that association? I like the play on the Matrix. I think that will be an interesting one for Kia. I think Budweiser is going to try to maintain their position that they won last year with the Clydesdale commercial. I think they probably hit a gold mine there. I don't think that has that particular type of advertisement has not saturated yet, as far as I can tell. We'll see. We'll see completely different, right? It's going to be a broad audience, but it'll be maybe a different audience. And then I think anything with humor. So the Muppets is interesting, and I think commercials like that will tend to do well. I'm curious and concerned about some like the Soda Streams and the CarMaxes and stuff like that, which they always tend to, and GoDaddy, which always tends to try to do different things, and there's nothing consistent. But the one consistent is that they're always rated bad for various reasons. But I think ultimately what we'll see is a competition between the heartstring and the humor.
Okay. Kind of a bonus question here. You brought up SodaStream, George.
Yep.
As I understand it, that ad is not going to show on TV because they threw in a reference to Coke and Pepsi at the end.
Yeah,
I
so-
haven't heard that they're removing it, which would put them back into the program. Am I wrong?
No, yeah. So they pushed back on SodaStream. And I think right now I think SodaStream, as far as I can tell, they're still going to advertise. They're going to have to do some pretty quick revisions. So I think they're probably working on 24-hour shifts right now.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, they're still going to advertise.
Because you can't just drop out. You lose your money if you get kicked out, right?
They're not going to drop out, but I think they were conscious of what they were doing, and they thought maybe they can pull a fast one and take some shots at the big boys, right? But that was never going to happen. I mean, that's just you don't take shots at Coke and Pepsi, which have been staples in advertising in the Super Bowl, and expect to let these guys get away with it.
David, you got a quick comment on that?
Yeah, two quick comments. One, I read yesterday that they actually have an alternate ending in the can for their international airings where competitive mentions are more strictly not allowed. So I think they may be able to cut that in because, to your point, they won't get their money back. But I also wonder if there's a double standard with something like SodaStream, where Coke and Pepsi have advertised in the past and they've poked fun at a delivery person in the competitor's uniform and clearly made reference to their competitors, and that's gotten through. And then a newcomer like SodaStream comes along and mentions the competition and and gets banned for it. So I also think it's it's interesting, but also a potential double standard. If SodaStream's paying their $4 million or whatever, just like anybody else, and there's no strict, hard and fast rule against poking fun at or mentioning competitors, then is that fair?
Okay. Last comment, Paul.
Yeah, I have a comment on that. Both really interesting perspectives on that. I'm more of a cynic. I think it's more of creating the media buzz. I think SodaStream knew exactly what they were doing, and knew what it was going to create.
Yep.
And what a better way to get a lot of buzz about their commercial than attacking the big boys. And I don't know. We'll wait and see. But it'll be an interesting commercial.
Okay.
Well, and last year they didn't air at all for that reason. They somehow were able to pull out. So I agree with Paul. I think they knew it going in. They figured best case it airs. Worst case, we have to change it, and we get a lot of buzz out of it. And either way, I think it's a win.
Okay. This has been a special Friday edition of Research Business Daily Report. We've been sponsored by KL Communications, experts in customer co-creation, whose new proprietary crowd-weaving platform is powering the next generation of online insight communities. David and George and Paul, thank you very much for your participation today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
And have a good time on Sunday.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You too.